Whether these beasts were named for their spines, or for some past unforgivable deed, no rat knew. Either way, Arlo was about to find himself at the pointy ends of this brood. Even young backstabber Red attacks were brutal, but a well-timed dodge would see Arlo escape unscathed. This backstabber lived up to its name with its deadly white attack, but Arlo's shield could block the deadly spikes. This young one used vicious yellow attacks. Arlo had to time his parries perfectly. This mother had left her young to fight alone, but the same could not be said of Lord Eivor as he leapt to his son's side. It was Lord Eivor's mighty blade that took her head, but the fight was won together. Arlo was reluctant to return to his bed, wondering how long he must wait to hunt again. The booming footsteps that woke him this time were nothing like those of his father. He had found his father. The warden stood alone, holding back a whole Darkwing army, their cruel Count Kazak leading them. His father charged, but the Darkwing Count was as fast as he was strong. The Winter's crown tumbled to Arlo's feet, now without a head to rest on. There was no time to grieve his father, as from above the Count revealed his greatest weapon, a sky scorcher. Not a fairy's tale, but an undead beast whose very breath could level kingdoms. And its eye was trained on Arlo. All that came next was a fog of bloodlust, snapping jaws, and the beating of leathery wings. But there could be no victory. Arlo awoke, groggy and warm to his father's shouts. Only he wasn't in bed. The warmth was from the fire that had engulfed Winter's Edge, and the shouts were his uncle's. The only other survivor of the Darkwing attack, Leaf was bruised and his hind paws barely steady. He'd seen villagers flee to the outskirts. Arlo knew it was up to him to make them safe. Arlo had found the reason his friends had fled. The taunting shrieks revealed that this was Baron Frostovic, son of the Darkwing who took his father, and therefore a perfect target for his revenge. His foe was beaten, but seeing what had been inflicted on Hilda and Krunk, Arlo's need for vengeance was only growing. Arlo suddenly wished to be within the walls of Winter's Edge, to hear the boot and boom of his father at dawn, a sound he realized he'd never hear again. He needed to return to whatever was left and make his plan. Of eggs. She was uninterested in who the owner might be, but the mother slither scale was very interested in her. Side by side, Erica and Arlo forced the slither scale from its lair. Erica would not leave Frey to travel alone. They would see him back at the Parliament. Too late. The nest was a writhing snare of slither scale. If any escaped, who knew how many would fall prey to them? Arlo would not let that happen. The blaze destroyed the last of the nest, but Arlo had no time to rest. The slither scale had returned. With the slither scale defeated, the forest settled into tranquility once more. Arlo braced for an onslaught of tiny, deadly feet, but the second nest was empty. As he started to destroy the nest, he felt the fur on the back of his neck stand on end. Now how one beast could feel like an army. He wondered if he would get a bonus for felling this giant as well. The owls called for Arlo's help. A ranger had gone to hunt a slither scale. He was seeking vengeance for a slither scale attack that took his family, but Arlo would not let the young ranger go the same way. Arlo found the ranger was already locked in battle with the slither scale. He would not survive long fighting alone. The young ranger was a fierce fighter, but no match for the slither scale. He barely thanked Arlo for helping him in this fight before he took off, seeking another. Arlo could not leave him to fight alone. There was no stopping him until the slither scale was defeated. The slither scale's lair. They would end its tyranny here and now. The slither scale was defeated at last. The young ranger took no spoils, and with only a brief hoot of thanks, he was gone. Arlo hoped the ranger's thirst for revenge was finally sated. Despite destroying the nests, the sounds of hundreds of feet could still be heard in the Golden Forest. They had to be cleared out, and Arlo was quick to volunteer. The giant death march was fast, but Arlo's tracking was faster. Just in time, as it had already found a victim. The villager was grateful for the rescue. They had been collecting herbs at the ditch opposite the village when the death march attacked. It still had business there, it seemed. The death march had made its nest here. When the villager disturbed it, the giant creature chased them away in fear for their young. This army was defeated, and Arlo was surprised to feel a small pang of regret. The creature had only wished to protect its nest. death march had made its nest here. When the villager disturbed it, the giant creature chased them away in fear for their young. This army was defeated, and Arlo was surprised to feel a small pang of regret. The creature had only wished to protect its nest. More bottles lay outside the forge, which was otherwise as quiet as every other dead thing that haunted this place. The pile of bottles was large, even for one who drinks like a merman, and it seemed to be breathing. Was amazed the merman could swing his hammer, let alone see who he was hitting. A couple of thumps on the head soon brought him to his senses. Something else came his way. Tumbling down the temple stair, Arlo was met with another horror. The head of the smith. It was Arlo now, took up the battle cry. Tried not to think of how many friends, old and new, lay dead. He still had more to do. Rita and Ruby were free, but without their father, there was little for them here. Arlo offered them a new home at Winter's Edge and a forge to continue in their father's footsteps. The mermaids were grateful and said they would find their way to the keep once they had laid Ron to rest. A stranger was meditating in the stillness. Arlo gasped. It was a frog. Before he could lift his blade, the frog croaked that he was an outcast, named Short Tongue. He'd come to rebuild the ancestral home of Bogmire Forge, a place for frogs who sought peace. No sooner had they agreed a truce, than the two warriors had to fight. Side by side, the pair fought well, and the attacker soon disappeared again, back into thin air. Persuaded of the frog's honesty, Arlo left Short Tongue to his quest for peace. In return, the frog swore Arlo would always find a warm welcome there. They crept up on the eight-legged monstrosity as she ensnared another frog in her webs. The webbing was thick and tough, but their blades soon cut them to ribbons. Short Tongue sent the terrified frog toward Bogmire Forge. Injured though she was, the queen had no intention of giving up her hunt. Her young hungered. Another villager freed. They too headed for Bogmire, and Arlo wondered how many more frogs it could take. A dank and unsettling place. It had to be the Queen's lair. Arlo wondered what his father would say if he could see him risking his life for frogs. Spinner Queen was dead, and the frogs were soon at work rebuilding the village. The warden was sure mammalian-amphibian relations would be forever changed. On hearing that Arlo was warden, the old rat was quick to report a beaver had moved onto the hill, rebuilding the old shack, and that maybe Arlo should check his permits. These farmers had been to the shack to trade with the beaver, but found no sign. Perhaps, like these rat folk, something else had found him first. The sky once again burned bright with a flashing light, but this time it was accompanied by an eerie laugh. Before the warden stood a slender rat, his lips still curled from laughter. As Arlo went to question the stranger, he clapped his paws together, imparting his gift onto the warden. Although Arlo was grateful for the gift, he could not ignore the feeling that this stranger was using him as part of some intricate plan. At the shack, the only clue was a tuft of fur and half-chewed logs, until he heard a snarl that stood Arlo's fur on end. A backstabber pup. The pup's nest would not be far. Arlo feared for the beaver's fate. Beaver lay unmoving, another death on his conscience. The culprit stood before him. Arlo did not have his father to aid him. This time he would fight alone. The backstabber lay defeated, and Arlo paid his respects to the beaver, who leapt up at Arlo's paw. Playing dead had spared his life. A chance to work and live at Winter's Edge brought a sparkle to Billy Beaver's eye. He could not wait to get his teeth into the stone of the mighty keep. Arlo hoped he did not mean it literally. Frog corpses were here still, but strangely rearranged. The Dark Wings had indeed come for the dead, and were using them for some nefarious purpose. Arlo Otto's stomach churned. As they came to the top of the ruins, they saw Little John. His smile at the sight of his father was the last he ever made. In a flash of bad teeth, his young life was ended. Robin's rage was terrible. He charged at the Darkwing, unleashing a hail of arrows. Together, they defeated the beast in a fury that sent all other bats from the ruin in terror. Robin was bereft. It was meant to be a simple hunt. He could not understand these flying abominations. Arlo offered what solace he could. Tuck was at Winter's Edge, where Robin could take some rest. Arlo could hear the terrified squeaks of the villagers chained inside. Only the Darkwing General had the key, and she would not hand it over alive. Arlo needed no more reason to kill her. bright eyes circled the shrine. As Arlo looked closer, he saw Lorenzo, blood pouring from his arm. This strange cult of owls were no healers. With the final cultist defeated, the elder drew something from his cloak. Lorenzo's arm. He swallowed it whole. Arlo soon wished that had been the worst of it. Was dead, and Arlo woke Lorenzo, who was as afraid as he was pained. Arlo sent the scared badger home where his brother was waiting to help him. The elder was distraught. The farmers had found their crop crushed into a trail of half-eaten roots and stems, all leading to the Backstabber's cave. Outside the cave, Arlo found the farmer's crops piled high. If Arlo thought it abandoned, he was to be disappointed. The warden had the Backstabber cornered in its cave. It might only be hungry, but the whole village would starve if it was not stopped. The smell of the beast's dung hit him as hard as the one who made it. Arlo wondered if he could fight while holding his breath. Of the quills fell clattering to the ground. The backstabber was defeated at last. But from the center of the cave came a faint squeak. Under the rocks and dirt was a small backstabber pup. It was young, curious, and unafraid. Arlo had an idea. The elder shouted for Arlo's help. The sheepdogs had been disappearing, leaving holes in the ground, and now the prize cow grub had gone too. The warden would investigate. Sheepbugs' pungent scent makes them easy to track. The few that were left were terrified. Arlo had no sooner realized who the culprit must be, and it was upon him, a mudworm of the deep. The mudworm turned and sped away, but Arlo followed. Perhaps it would lead him to the cow grub. The cow grub moved, lying helpless at the center of the nest. Arlo would have to deal with the mudworm first. The prize cow grub was still alive and mooed gratefully at Arlo. It was almost as happy to see him as the elder would be at its return. Short Tongue had reports of a strange creature in the rift, one that disappears in front of their eyes. It was a stealth claw, he was sure of it. They should go back to where they fought the last one and look for clues. No stealth claw, but an attack nonetheless. A band of warrior frogs harassing the village blacksmith. Their eyes lit up at the sight of Short Tongue, only they called him by a name which we need not repeat here. Short Tongue and Arlo returned the insult, and with more than words. The blacksmith was glad to head to Bogmire in safety. All should have been silent in the blacksmith's wake, but Arlo was suddenly aware of a squelching of mud around them. The stealth claw was here. won this round, but they could not leave it at that. Frog and Rat agreed to hunt the stealth claw to its lair. Short Tongue was worried. A group of frogs had been seen in the rift. They must be lost and would no doubt be in need of rescue. From afar, the villagers seemed lifeless, lost in battle or to the cold. But up close, the truth was revealed. They were training dummies. It was a trap. The assassin was vicious, but Frog and Rat held their ground. Injured, the attacker fled, but Short Tongue was not about to let him escape. The pair found him licking his wounds at a makeshift camp. The assassin seemed to forget his pain as he took up his weapon. With the assassin defeated, Arlo breathed a squeak of relief. But Short Tongue was not done. He needed to know who had sent them. The frog's frantic search through the assassin's belongings gave up the answer. A gold coin bearing the mark of Glubba the Gut. Short Tongue asked Arlo to meet him at Bogmire. He had work to do. The assassin's gold coin pointed the pair toward one path. There was no choice but to confront the warlord, Glubba the Gut. Warlord sat surrounded by enslaved frogs and laughed at the pair's demands for their freedom. He had a surprise for his guests. The stench of the dungeon hit them as hard as its floor, a floor that started to shake, and from the shadows emerged the largest toad core that Arlo had ever seen. And frog slayed the beast, its bloated corpse sinking slowly into the mud. Arlo felt a pang of regret. It had been a slave as much as the others. They found the warlord's soldiers celebrating the pair's defeat. Rat and Frog were happy to correct them. Seeing the last of his soldiers fall, Glubba croaked his rage. He was the greatest warlord of all frog kind, and they would regret this day. Glubba's tyranny had ended. Short Tongue offered the frogs a home at Bogmire Forge. Together, he and Arlo had freed the Rift as well as the frogs. Perhaps this would be an era of peace for both. Tuck had settled in well at Winter's Edge. So much so he planned to stay and open his own shop. He hoped Arlo might help him collect rare items to help draw in ratfolk from far and wide. The young rat was excited. He had worked out exactly what he needed and asked if Arlo would meet him in the outskirts. Arlo was glad to see Tuck's spirits finally lifted and could not refuse him. At Mossbug Farm, Arlo started to regret his hasty offer of help. The farmer had seen a beast, and shouting something about luring it with bloodfruit, he went to hide in terror. Tuck grinned. He knew exactly where to go. Arlo found Tuck at the bottom of Blackfoot Caverns, the fruit he needed just out of his reach. Arlo's bow would make quick work of this. The bloodfruit burst open as it landed on the cavern floor, and seemingly in the next second came the terrible sound of beating wings. With the fruit in hand, Tuck asked Arlo to come to Longfang Castle, where they would set their trap. It was eerily quiet at the ruins. Tuck had everything ready for the trap. It only needed Arlo to toss the blood fruit into the cooking pot. The stench would be sure to attract the beast. They only needed to wait. A high-pitched shriek pierced through Arlo's dreams, and soon the flapping of wings was upon them. Tuck asked if Arlo could carve its beak from the beast's remains, the perfect centerpiece for his new shop. The young rat could barely contain his excitement and ran off, keen to find the builder at Winter's Edge, now able to build the shop of his dreams. The farm's troubles, however, were far from over. Now the farmers were under attack by a giant winged beast. The elder begged for the warden's help once more. The field was too empty. Arlo followed a familiar scent. Blood. The body of the farmer missed him by a whisker. The winged beast was coming for him. The beast was injured, but Arlo could see its trail of smoke. At its end, he could finish what he started. Nestled among the eggs in the bird's nest was a farmer, and still alive, no doubt meant as a snack for the hatchlings. The farmer was free, and Arlo sent him home. He would not be these chicks' first meal. In the absence of the elder were-owl, the cult had retreated into hiding, but the rangers report the cult planned to anoint a new leader and were preparing a sacrifice at the shrine. The sacrifice ceremony was underway. Arlo had only moments to stop it. Stopped another cultist transforming, but he sensed that the cult were far from finished in the forest. Sigrid had worrying news. Rumors of a banquet in honor of a newly transformed were-owl flew around the forest. This was Arlo's chance to put an end to the cult. These Night Eyes were transporting freshly butchered kills. The owl folk of the Golden Forest had forsworn meat generations ago. These were cultists headed to the feast. Meat. This much meat surely meant the whole cult would be at the banquet. The young ranger had news to give, as well as thanks. He had heard the cultists speak of the Totem Shrine. Could this be where they would hold their banquet? At the Totem Shrine, the scene was set for a bloody red banquet. If Arlo had any say, it would be their last meal. Defeated, the remaining cultists would return to the shadows. The camp leader raised his war horn. Its unearthly screech seemed to stir the very air into fury. This was not the wind, but the beating of leathery wings. The camp leader was defeated, but they had to warn the rabbits. Darkwings were on their way. Razek had sent one of his strongest generals, Necromancer Guraz. His defeat would rob the bats of a great weapon. Was safe in Rabbit Paws once more. Gray Ears swore that if the Warden of the Wastes ever called for help, the rabbits would answer. Doug was an unlikely opponent for the first round. His small stature made it hard for him to wield a sword, but when it came to fighting for his king, Doug stood 10 paws tall. No match for Arlo's superior skill. Reggie could already see this would be a tournament that they would squeak of through the ages. Dennis, veteran of the Green Ward's War and captain of the Royal Guard, would be a true challenge for Arlo. The crowd's cheers for the king's brother echoed off the arena walls. Was a veteran too, used to fighting monsters and Darkwings with ice under paw. Dennis did not compare. Now the crowd cheered for him. Arlo's final opponent was the king himself. Reggie had seen off the frog invaders almost single-pawed and was beloved by his subjects. This fight would be a tale for their times.
matched in stature and skill, there was not a whisker between them. They shook paws in truce. No rat could doubt Arlo's worth now. Reggie said to meet him by the docks. Together, they would wipe out the Dark Wings once and for all. Together, they would attack Mount Cauldron. Another runestone on its pillar. Arlo would decide later whether it was wrong to raid this tomb for its secrets. After he knew them. With the final rune in place, the ancient door opened into darkness. A faint wind rose and fell in his whiskers. Arlo laughed at his thought that something in here was breathing. The burial chamber revealed both tales were true. A treasure hoard, and guarding it was the ancient Draugr Harald Bluefang. Fearsome warrior, now laid to rest. More importantly, Arlo had found his treasure. Inside the castle, they found themselves in the chef's store. Before they could be disgusted at the contents, they had to take care of the chef. in step, a flawless dance of blood and vengeance. Neither knew that their own blood united them, but perhaps, just then, they felt it. They stood together in fellowship, the clans of the Ratdom. Here they would make their final assault. Reggie raised his sword and issued the cry. Charge, army of the mighty Paw! Emerging through the mist at the base of Mount Cauldron, Arlo came upon the king, locked in combat. Count Kazakh and his undead Sky Scorcher. Arlo rushed to his side. But again, he was too late. The Sky Scorcher was gone, flying to the summit with the king in its claws. The despair took hold. Just then, he heard his friends fighting on. He could not abandon them. He stood tall. He would be their captain now, and they would follow, even under the shadow of Dark Wings. Arlo found Rita battling the Darkwing Smith, but the Smith's mighty hammer soon overpowered her. Together, Arlo and Erica fought the Darkwing Smith. The fiery heat at the heart of the mountain burned hotter than any forge. Rita moved, clutching to life. Arlo ordered Erica to take her to camp. He would continue alone. They entered the huge throne room. They finally set eyes on the foul, laughing figure of Count Kazakh, sat on his icy throne. Turtle kneeled exhausted before him. This pained the warden more than he could explain. Kazakh left his beasts to fight them. He had a king to kill. Arlo and Robin fought with all they had, their hope driving them on. The beast fell, but there was no time to rest. Leaving Robin to tend to Bertle, Arlo headed to the summit to find Reggie. The icy wind bit at his fur as he emerged on the peak. He saw, silhouetted in the mist, Count Kazak, and in his claws he held King Reggie, dangling over the edge. With a shriek of victory, the Count let go of the king and seemed to melt into the fatal mist. They flew into battle. The Warden and the Count's weapons clashed, echoing across the mountain. Corrupted body fell heavy on the ground. Arlo rushed to the edge, calling for the king, but the only answer in the mist was the icy wind. The war was won, but Arlo could not feel the victory. He barely noticed his friends join him. The Fellowship bowed their heads in honor of their brave king. The tale of this war would be as much of loss as of winning. They returned to the Crimson Keep in near silence, each with their thoughts. There would be no victory parades. Arlo heard a commotion ahead. In the throne room were raised voices. Bertil stood in front of Reggie's throne, holding the crown, asking who should now carry this burden. Dennis barged forward to claim it. He was brother of the king. It was his by birth. Robin stepped forward and proclaimed that Arlo was rightfully king. Without him, there would be no kingdom to rule. He had proved himself on the peak. He was not alone. Leaders of the clans stepped forward and echoed their favor of the warden. Arlo objected. He had no claim here. Bertil slammed his staff into the floor to silence the rising voices. He had a secret to tell. Arlo's father was King Rattus. Bertil himself had delivered him as a child to the warden. He had a claim, if he was willing to take it. Arlo felt the truth of it, and the paw of destiny seemed to push him forward to take his place upon the throne. Bertil placed the crown upon his head. The weight of rule was his now. Dennis had been forgotten in the shouts of joy from the clans. He raised his blade and swore vengeance. It was his birthright, and he would reclaim it from this usurper. Arlo set aside the warden and became the king. A new dawn broke over the land, bright and clear. The king sensed it would not last. The promise of his half-brother would surely mean war would come again. But that, as they say, is a tale for another time.